As an independent consultant who lives in the crowded city of Lagos, I get to set my meeting times with my clients so I do not get stuck in Lagos traffic. I remember once, though, I was stuck in the usual rush hour traffic. This means spending as long as 2 hours to complete a journey that will normally take 20 minutes. And as I turned to observe the people in the vehicles all around me, I wasn't surprised that most of the people were professionally dressed and obviously on their way to work. Wow, I thought to myself. I hope these people love and enjoy what they do, because to put yourself under such stress every day for a job you do not enjoy would be sacrilege. You see, I love life and I'm deliberate about enjoying my journey no matter what the circumstances are. Your work is an important part of your journey, and through Bliss at Work, I want to help people like you to enjoy your journey and find fulfillment and joy at work, no matter what it is that you do. You see, my career in human resources has given me the opportunity to interact with many, many individuals inside and outside work. And more often than not, there's often that individual who seems unusually withdrawn and doesn't seem to fit in. Now, why is that? Good question. Mental health or mental fitness is not a subject that's widely discussed in many societies, and most especially not in the workplace, where we tend to spend most of our productive hours on a daily basis. It's really a shame because people continue to suffer needlessly. And even in those societies where people are described to love life too much, to die, we're beginning to witness an increase in suicide cases. This course is to create awareness around mental health and to help you know what to do when someone around you or you are showing signs of mental fatigue. My name is Kemi Adiniro, and I'm your master trainer. In this course today, we're going to be looking at our world today. We'll also be looking at what it means to be mentally healthy. From there, we will begin to look at the mental health continuum, and then we'll talk about temporary and common mental health disorders, as well as the consequences of poor mental health. We would look at stigma, helping others, finding help, and of course, staying healthy. Let's begin our course. Let's look at our world today. I always like to start with something funny. I got this on the internet. Look at those kids. Isn't that something? That's another one. And that one in particular reminds me of my daughter. These are images of what has happened recently in our world. Okay? I found this and I thought this was interesting. If the schools are closed for too long, the parents are going to find a vaccine before the scientists. These are sentiments that have just recently occurred with the ongoing pandemic that we're all witnessing. Okay, so we're looking at our world today. And our world today has changed so much. There's so much that is characteristic of our world today. You know, we've had stories of financial loss. A lot of people have said or have claimed that they have lost a lot as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. But while some people are crying about their losses financially, there are also people who are recording financial gains, because whether we like it or not, this season has opened up opportunities for people in different industries. Logistics, for example, is doing very well. The media is doing very well. Telecoms, our internet service providers are doing very well. So while some businesses have sort of shrunk in this season, some businesses have actually expanded. And then people are losing jobs. A lot of people have lost their jobs. But at the same time, people have gained jobs and are gaining new skills. Also, these days, there's a lot of talk around physical health. You know, people are reporting cases of cancer, more cases of diabetes, more cases of high blood pressure. These are things that are characteristic of our world today. And then there's also the issue of mental health. But I dare say mental health is not getting enough attention or as much attention as issues around physical health. This course, remember, is to talk about mental health, to create more awareness so we know what to do, we know what the signs to look out for so that we can get help timely. And then there are also issues around security. People have talked about security a lot. We've heard of an increase in crime rates all across the nations of the world. People are reporting security issues. And so this is also characteristic of these times. And then in terms of relationships and families, I've heard a lot of stories. I've heard exciting stories. I've heard about families who have bonded stronger together during this period. It's been a time when people are actually discovering values, looking at their values again. It's been a time when families are actually eating together. Parents are getting to know their children better. Spouses are coming together stronger. I actually heard of a couple who renewed their vows during this season. And at the same time, there's also the flip side. At the same time, there have also been a lot of calls around spousal abuse. People are not used to being with each other for so long and have had to stay together for so long, and it has led to a lot of abuse in some situations. Then there's also the issue of social distancing. That's a new set of words which seems to be common these days. Everybody's talking about social distances. This has now become commonplace to talk about in this era with the coronavirus pandemic. And also people are beginning to talk about the new normal, and I find that very interesting. But I think the new normal, if you ask me, is a positive thing. What it is for many people is simply that we're now beginning to think of new ways of doing things. Most times, for example, a course like this would have been done in person. But, part of the new normal is giving us the grace, the impetus to actually go out there and to begin to present courses online. Module 2, what does it mean to be mentally healthy? Being mentally healthy is simple. It simply means that the capacity to feel, to think, and to act in ways that enhances your ability to enjoy life and to deal with the challenges that life has. There would always be challenges, but with the challenges, you can still enjoy life. And that is what being mentally healthy means. It means we feel well. It means you can cope with stress, the everyday stresses that we face. It means you can still achieve your personal goals. So irrespective of everything that is happening around you, you can achieve your goals. Irrespective of the coronavirus pandemic, you can achieve your goals. And it's actually more than the absence of illness or disease. Mental health is about your feeling, it's about how you act, it's about how you do. And it involves a continuum. There's a continuum, the mental health continuum. You see, our mental health or our mental faculties are always going to be exerted with the normal ups and downs of life. It's always going to happen. Just like you will always have to wake up from sleep, you will always have to exert your mental faculties. Now, if you do not deal properly with the normal ups and downs of life, it could actually lead to temporary mental health problems. Thank God they're called temporary. And they're called temporary because they can actually be dealt with. But if these are not dealt with properly, if we do not take the right steps, it can actually lead to active mental disorders, which is a place where we do not want to actually get to. So it starts with the normal ups and downs of life, up to the poor parts where you actually have active mental disorders. You see, when people talk about mental health, you often think of somebody who ends up in a psychiatrist hospital or somebody who is nuts down the road. But it's not always that. It's not always that. If dealt with properly, we can actually live fulfilling and happy lives. Okay? Now, in this module, Module 3, we would look at some common mental health disorders so that we know what to look out for, so that we can give help and we can ask for help when we need it. Now, I talked about the temporary mental health problems. This is something that occurs as a result of significant stress or trauma. Many times, we can't avoid stress. We can't avoid trauma. But if we do not deal with stress and trauma properly, it will actually lead, or it could lead, to a mental health problem. Now, there's trauma that is caused as a result of personal reasons. Perhaps there's death in the family, there's serious illness of a loved one. These are not things that you can help. These are things that occur. But we have to be able to cope with these things so that it doesn't degenerate into a situation that can be actually disastrous at the end of the day. Then there's also trauma that is caused professionally. Sometimes there are workplace fatalities. Somebody can die in the place of work. I've heard stories of people slumping at work, or people having accidents at work. These things occur. Sometimes, these happen as a result of circumstances beyond your control. Nevertheless, we'll each react to these things in different ways. And this is likely for many people, or this causes trauma for many people. But again, these are things that can be dealt with. There's also trauma that is caused for social reasons. Things like death in the community, natural disasters, the pandemic that we're actually experiencing. These are things that actually cause stress, temporary stress on a social basis. But you see, when we're able to deal with these things, we can actually come out ahead, because problems, like I said, problems will always occur. In some cities, there's consistent traffic, there's blackout. For some people, it brings stress, but the key is understanding how you can actually deal with these things so that they don't cause problems for you in the future. But these problems can be resolved through personal coping strategies. Taking time to recharge the batteries is so important. It's critical to take time out. It's critical to take breaks. A lot of people don't take breaks, and they keep heaping up the stress. Our bodies are made to relax. We're not made to walk and walk and walk and do and do and do and pile on all the stress without taking breaks. So it's important that we take time to recharge the batteries. It's important that you connect with family and friends, connect with people of like minds, connect with positive-minded people who will encourage you, who will inspire you. It's also important to note that temporary mental health problems, like those traumatic situations that occur, can also be resolved by counseling or therapy. And there's also the place of meditation, spiritual connection, and also prayer. Now, this course is not meant to discuss the deep details around mental disorders. It's just to give us some awareness of what these disorders are, and to give us guidance as to where to get help when we need help. So I would briefly talk about some common mental disorders that occur. There are major depressive disorders. This is like depression, where you feel low, you're unenthusiastic, you don't feel like doing anything, you're moody, Sometimes we notice this in ourselves, and sometimes we notice these things in others. It's a disorder that is often clinically diagnosed. And there's also what I will call the generalized anxiety disorder. This is when a person has some compulsive behavior, eating disorders, or washing their hands excessively, or just being paranoid. That's a generalized anxiety disorder. It's not that people want to be that way. People unfortunately find themselves in this state, possibly because they haven't been able to take care of a stressful or traumatic situation. And so they end up with generalized anxiety disorder. And then there's also people who abuse drugs, who abuse medication. And these things tend to have an impact on our mental well-being. This will be called the substance abuse disorders. Now, all these disorders that I have talked about, these three disorders that I've talked about, can usually be treated through medication or through talk therapy. And then you have other disorders like adjustment disorder. Maybe there's been a death in the family. Maybe something really terrible has happened, and you are finding it very difficult to go back to normal. It happens. These are just like you. Somebody can have a cough or a flu. You know, these mental situations occur, and all they need is treatment. And then there's also post-traumatic stress disorder, when somebody has gone through something extremely traumatic, and it's very difficult for them to come out of this situation. But the good news is that it doesn't have to be that way. There's help available. These people can actually get out of those disorders through talk therapies. Now that we have an idea of what these mental disorders are like, both the temporary and the more severe mental health disorders are like, let's begin to look at the consequences of poor mental health. This is what we're going to be talking about in this module, Module 4. Now, I'd like to think of the consequences as coming in 3 dimensions. They're the physical consequences, the psychological consequences, and also the occupational consequences. Physically, when you are in poor mental health, it affects everything about your body, because a man is only well if his body, his mental health, and his spirit are fine, his emotions are fine. Now, so when you are in poor mental health, it affects you physically, and that's why there have been increased cases of heart disease, diabetes, cancer. We're beginning to hear these things. And when your mental health is compromised, it also affects your immunity. And a lot of people, or a lot of us are talking about immunity these days. We want our immunity high up, you know, and so it's important that we take care of our mental health to ensure that we're well. Psychologically, when you're in poor mental health, there's a lack of motivation. So we need to watch out. There are times when you're just not motivated. You're lethargic. You don't want to do anything. Check yourself. It might be a sign of a temporary mental health condition that we actually need to think about. You see, mental health is no longer that taboo that we should not talk about. It's something that is with us and is so common. And the moment we begin to embrace or the fact that it is there, we will begin to look for solutions to ensure that it doesn't get the best of us. And so other psychological consequences would also be inappropriate behavior. That's when it's beginning to become extreme, where people are shot. You know, there was a time I was flying on an aircraft, and I happened to get a seat at the back row seat. You know, I think it was two rows to the end of the plane. And I had this guy sit beside me, and he kept up going to the toilet, which happened to be at the back. And he was at the tail of the plane, and he kept on shutting the door and shutting the door and shutting the door and shutting the door. I was so scared, you know, all throughout that flight. I prayed because I didn't know how severe his situation was, you know, but he was actually dealing with something. And then there's also the occupational part. When we suffer from poor mental health, it will affect your productivity because it already affects your drive. And so low productivity sets in. And then you begin to complain about issues around promotion, not being liked by your boss. But many times it's as a result of the things that we're exhibiting and the things that we're exuding. So low productivity is a sign that we need to check ourselves. Also, withdraw from your colleagues. Or when you find that a colleague is constantly withdrawing from others, check it. Something might be going on with that person. And then poor performance at work, like absenteeism, missing deadlines, and also negativity. These are also all signs. In Module 5, we will begin to look at dealing with stigma, the stigma that comes with poor mental health. But I have some interesting facts. Did you know that only 1/3 of those who need mental health services actually receive them? More interesting is the fact that 78% of those diagnosed with depression will keep it to themselves for fear of losing their jobs. So some people actually go and see doctors, some people actually go and seek for help, but they keep it to themselves just because they do not want to lose their jobs. That tells me that there's a lot around this disease or this situation, and we need to begin to break barriers. We need to begin to create awareness so that people can actually get help. But as a colleague, how can you help to tear down this stigma that occurs? How can you begin to help to make things better for yourself and for others? Okay? So what are these stigmas that I'm talking about? There's a self-stigma, the stigma that you place upon yourself. So somebody, for example, feels sad all the time, or is moody, or feels in a particular way that I described earlier. And they begin to see themselves as weak. Rather than talk to people about it, they say to themselves, I don't know why I'm feeling this way. I must be a weak person. They begin to judge themselves. They begin to judge themselves. And they are judging themselves because that's the way society judges them. So this is stigma that is placed upon themselves. And then there's also the stigma, public stigma, the stigma that comes from others. So people look at somebody who is going through issues, who has issues, and they say, oh, I don't know what is going on with Sikira. I don't know why they're behaving this way. Oh, really, really, really? Don't we all have problems? Let them get a hold of their lives and take charge of their lives and deal with the situation. But we forget that everybody is built different. We all have different thresholds for pain. So the way I deal with an issue is going to be different from the way Veronica deals with an issue. Let's be mindful of that. And then there's associative stigma, stigma that comes as a result of being related to somebody that actually has a mental health problem. So people don't get invited to places just because their sister has a mental health issue or their friend has a mental issue. These are just thoughts and perceptions that we have to begin to change in order for us to nip this thing in the bud, in order for us to get ahead, in order for us to succeed in the area of mental health. Help is on the way. That's our Module 6. In Module 6, let's talk about the challenges. Let's talk about being helpful. Have you ever been approached by a colleague in distress who wanted help but didn't know what to say or do? This happens. Or have you observed a colleague become more withdrawn? What did you do? Or have you watched as a colleague struggle to manage a difficult situation? Or have you been frustrated at a teammate for meeting deadlines or calling in sick all the time? What did you do? What can you do to help? What are the resources that are available for people in these situations? And I say, when a person shares with you, they have come to you because they trust you. Let us not mess up that trust. When someone comes to you because they need help, one of the first things to do is to actively listen. Don't be too quick to talk, to say, oh yes, I noticed that about you. Oh, I see. No. It has taken a lot of courage for them to come up to you, to talk to you. So if you want to be helpful to a colleague or to someone who has come to confide in you, actively listen. And as you actively listen, express empathy. Oh, I am sorry. I can see that. Don't be quick to judge. Suspend all judgment. Don't say, oh, that's what happened to my sister. Oh, that's what happened to that person and this person. It's not a time to judge. It's also a time to keep confidentiality. Remember, it takes a lot in every society. I don't care what part of the world you are. It takes a lot for someone to come to talk to you about these kinds of matters. So please keep confidentiality. And then begin to discuss solutions only after you have thoroughly understood what it is that person has talked about. And then build a bridge to resources. Don't try to force them in a particular direction. Give them advice if you have the information, give them information. And if you don't have the information, help them to seek for information from people who know better and can give them the necessary advice that they need. And then agree on a follow-up or get together. Don't just listen and forget it there. Show concern, check back, agree to check back so that the person feels good that they have come to you. Now, there are also times when people will not come to you. Remember, I told you that 78% of those who have actually been diagnosed don't tell anyone. But if you're in a work setting, for example, and you notice somebody is showing signs of distress and they haven't come to you, you can actually take a step, ask for permission to give feedback, look for a good time to talk to them and ask about giving feedback. Be conversational, use I statements so that the person actually feels comfortable enough to talk to you. And state what you have observed. You're not judging them. Remember, it's not about judgment. State facts. Don't state things that other people have told you about. Ensure that these are things that you have observed yourself. Explain your concern and why it is you want to help them. And then reinforce their confidentiality that, this is safe with me. I just want to help you because I can see that it is affecting you. And then listen, express empathy, be supportive, and also be that bridge for them to get professional help, okay? Now, when you approach a person, you don't just do it. You have to be tactful about doing these things. Plan how you will begin the conversation. It's not an everyday type of conversation, so you actually have to plan the conversation. And then again, provide the facts, observations, example of that behavior. Use statements rather than questions, as I said earlier. But also remember to respect boundaries. We all have boundaries. People don't invite you to not everybody will invite you to every area of their lives. So be careful and respect those boundaries. Remember to suspend judgment. And after understanding, again, build a bridge to professional resources. There is help that is available, okay? And you can get support. On the job, you can talk to a team lead who you trust. You can talk to team members that you trust. You can talk to your HR partner that you trust. And you can talk to an employee assistance provider. A lot of organizations have this service where you can actually talk to somebody anonymously about how you're feeling mentally. You see, there's enough to cause this mental stress that we're talking about. Living in some cities, the traffic alone, the social amenities situation alone is enough to bring some stress upon us. So let us not be ashamed to seek for help when help is needed. And at home, there are family members. There are people in your family that you can actually talk to. There are people who are going through the same things. Use them. Talk to them. There are friends who you can talk to. There are general practitioners. There are coaches. There are counselors available today that you can talk to. And there are therapists that you can also talk to about your mental health situation. And in your community, there are all kinds of resources available. Today, this program is being aired in Lagos, Nigeria. However, I'm not unmindful of the fact that this program or this course will be viewed all over the world. But it's important to note that in every country, there is help available. There is official help available. For us in Nigeria, there's the Mental Health Foundation of Nigeria. There's also in Lagos, the city of Lagos where I happen to live, there's the Lagos State Ministry of Health. There's a mental health department. There's also the Federal Ministry of Health. Now, if you look in your yellow pages and you begin to look for mental health, foundations of mental health, you will find something or you would find an association that you can seek help from. Module 7, staying healthy. It's important that we stay healthy, and it's important that we know how to stay mentally healthy. And I have some tips on how we can stay mentally healthy. I have first the 5 M's. The first M is mindfulness. Be mindful of your thoughts. Once you begin to think those bad thoughts, because sometimes, our thoughts now develop into real visions, and they can actually develop into action. So be mindful of what you're thinking about at any point in time. So think good thoughts. There's nothing wrong with thinking good thoughts. There's nothing, sometimes I fantasize, and I find that it actually helps me because it lifts my spirit. It's also important that you meditate. Meditation has been known to help lots of people who have engaged in the practice of meditation. And it doesn't have to be anything spooky. Just spending 5 minutes just to center on yourself and just to clear your head. So meditation is good. And if you need more help around meditation, the internet is filled with all kinds of meditation techniques, and you can begin to look at some of these things to actually help you. Very useful. Then movement is important to move. Many times, depressed people sit in one place, they don't want to move. Movement actually helps. Movement actually helps your physiology. It actually helps you mentally. So it's important that you engage in movement because that will change your state. That will keep you healthy. Mastery is also, my 4th M, is so important. Mastery of something, of a subject. Mastery ignites passion. So master something, be good at something. It changes your state and it helps your state. And also, don't forget about meaningful connection. Make meaningful connections. The truth is that not everybody belongs in your space. Not everybody belongs in your life. And so there are lots of connections that you may have today that do not serve you. You need to look at yourself and begin to look at those connections that serve you and build those connections. And begin to get rid of those connections that just want to talk about bad news. They just want to talk about the bad issues. They just want to remind you of everything that's not working, that will keep you in a poor mental state. And then it's also important that you talk about your feelings. Nothing wrong about talking about your feelings. When you're hurt, let people know that you're hurt. When you're angry, let people know that you're angry. It's important to be self-aware. But talk about your feelings. If you're feeling moody, talk about it. Because as you talk about it, solutions begin to come. Ideas of how to get out of that particular state begins to come. Keep active. It's important to be active. Exercise is good. It helps. It oils the brain. Eat well. Do more of the greens, the vegetables. Begin to get rid of the sugars, the processed foods, because these things have a way of affecting us mentally. It's also important to sleep. There's all kinds of studies that have been done around sleep. A person that sleeps well or gets the right amount of sleep is able to function well mentally. Keep in touch with people. No man is an island, and keeping in touch with people has now become so much easier now with the internet. So keep in touch with people, and when you need help, ask for help. Just like you will ask for help when you have a flu, when you would have a cold, or you have a headache, ask for help when you begin to realize that mentally you're not quite where you need to be. I like this quote from Anthony Robbins. He says, the higher your energy level, the more efficient your body. The more efficient your body, the better you feel, and the more you will use your talent to produce outstanding results. All of us are here for a reason, and we want to produce outstanding results. But a broken body and a broken mental body cannot help us to produce outstanding results. And Fred Rogers says that anything that is human is mentionable. What is that issue? What is that mental issue? So you feel suicidal. It's not new. So you feel low. It's not new. And Fred Rogers says that anything that's human is mentionable, and anything that is mentionable can be manageable. It is better you begin to talk about these feelings so that you can get help. I read a story once of a lady who had been feeling suicidal towards her 1-year-old child. She just kept thinking things, and one day she took that child and drowned that child right in her home in a large basin or a large tub of water. Now, this only happened because she did not deal with those feelings, or those feelings were not dealt with. Perhaps if she had, I understand she even talked to somebody about it, but the person she talked about it to did not take it seriously. Perhaps if that person had taken it seriously and had helped find help, had helped become a bridge towards finding help, perhaps that 1-year-old would be alive today. When we can talk about our feelings, they become less overwhelming, less upsetting, and less scary. Those are the words of Fred Rogers which I leave you today. It has been my pleasure to deliver this course to you. I hope you have learned from it. You have learned that your mental health is important. It's important to take care of yourself so that at the end of the day, you're able to deliver outstanding results to your world.